I honestly feel that crying is therapeutic. I've gotten to the point where I used to hate it if I cried or I felt like crying. Like I hated it. And it's not like I love it now when I want to cry. I feel like crying or I want to cry. But I have learned that if I feel like crying, I am going to cry because afterwards I'm going to feel so much better. It's another form of just processing those emotions. I'm going to get it out. It's just like if there was something in there, just like I'm not going to keep it and hold on to it. I'm going to vomit it out. I'm going to like get it out of my body. So crying to me is another one of those things. I don't hold back from crying. If I feel like crying, I'm going to cry because that helps me overall to stay in a more positive emotional state. Where and I've learned from experience, if I hold in that crying, I actually, it lowers my emotional state over the longer term, right? So instead of being at a higher emotional state, I'm now kind of down here because I'm holding in this crying.
Trying so hard not to cry.
Not cry, right? And it's like, nope, not worth it. I think for me, it depends on the time of the month, really.
Yep.
About once a month, I'm like, I need to cry. I know early on in our marriage, when I did cry, you thought it was a big deal and you would be like, why are you crying? It doesn't make any sense. It's not even a big deal.
Because to me, crying meant big deal.
Right. Like the only time I've really seen you cry is when your brother died.
Yeah.
So, for him, it is a big deal. Where what you did have to learn about me is crying usually came after a whole bunch of little things got stacked until finally, it's like the final straw. And then I'm in tears and you're like, why is the dinner being burnt worth crying about? I'm like, that's not what I'm crying about. I'm crying about everything that happened for the last month that bothered me. And that was just the final thing, right? So that helping, first of all, I had to understand about myself. And then like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That really helped me to be able to get the words to help you understand it. So then now, and it took time to remind you, I'd be like, remember, I'm not crying about the thing. I'm just crying. That was the catalyst, but it's all the things.
Yep.
Now we'll refer to it like the ocean. It's like it's the ocean I'm crying about. It's all the drops in the ocean. It's not just the one little drop or the one wave. It's all of that stuff.
Yep. So
I think that understanding though
is huge.
Is huge because then you're able to say, oh, okay, you at least have a better framework for why I'm crying. We were talking about having good feelings in our home. We mentioned a bunch of the things that contribute to not having good feelings, one of which can be getting upset over small things. If we can begin to realize and recognize patterns that, sometimes that's a form of venting. And then if we can, because here's one of the keys, I think, and it's obviously challenging and it takes practice, but when we can recognize that someone is just venting and we can acknowledge and validate their emotion because you're like, yeah, I get it. I've been there. I've felt that way before. That dissipates the emotion rather than spreading it and multiplying it. Because if they have that emotion and then I take on that emotion and then I spread it to the next one, like that's how we create the feelings we don't want in our family. I've developed the ability, most of the time, not all of the time, that when my children are experiencing some sort of emotion, so I think the key piece there to recognizing all of these things that are going on, all of these emotions that are happening, all of the irritations, annoyances, frustrations, right? Our job is not to take all of that on ourselves.
Yes.
Our job is to get the tools to help others move through it. And again, you guys have heard us say, you can't, well, of course, you can't draw from an empty well. You have to be full. So you have to be filled with positive emotion, first of all.
Yep.
If you're in negative emotion, you can't help. I know that. I've learned that. If I'm in a negative emotional state, I cannot help them get to a better emotional state. I first have to be in a better emotional state in order to be able to help them. It's like the drowning analogy. If you're drowning, you can't save someone else who's drowning. You have to be standing on the edge of the riverbank. I think Laura shared that one. You know, like you have to be standing on solid ground before you can help save someone who's drowning. And emotion, you know, emotions can be very powerful. You can feel like you're drowning in emotion. So that's one key. The other is I have to have walked the path myself. Like I've had to have learned how to do these things so that I can tell my kids, share with my kids, model for my kids how to do that as well, so that when they feel those negative emotions, I have the tools because I've done it to be able to share with them and say, hey, here's what you do. Let's process this emotion and move on.